22 before the hour of 9 o'clock with Sean and Frank, Maryland's wake-up call. Our next guest was sent to Congress on 2010 from the great state of Arkansas. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee, the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, and the House Committee on the Judiciary, also serving as an assistant whip for the majority. He served in the U.S. Army Reserve for 14 years, deployed to Iraq, holds the rank of major. He joins us now on our Newsmakers Hotline, Congressman Tim Griffin. Good morning, Congressman, and thanks for your service to the country.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We had this story. Of course, it cropped up last year, and it's back again in the last couple of weeks regarding we know we have a right to a lot of things in America. We're constantly told that, but a right to a free cell phone. And you this Lifeline program, which I understand started back in the 80s to guarantee landlines for low-income households, has now been expanded. It's been growing by leaps and bounds. I think by the latest number I had was $1.3 billion in 2010. And you introduced a bill last year to kind of stop this thing. And how are the efforts going so far?
Well, we've got a long way to go. Unfortunately, a lot of my colleagues just have never had anyone, any of their constituents complain. They've never had any of their constituents bring it to their attention, and they're just not aware of it. I first learned of it during the 2010 campaign. I was at some event. It was some kind of, a family festival or something. There was a booth over to the side where someone was passing out some literature on how to get a free cell phone. And I just walked by it, and they said, "Hey, free cell phone." I walked over, and I said, "Wait a minute, you're telling me that you can just get a free cell phone if you receive any of these," and they had a long list, any of these federal assistance grants or programs or whatever. And they said, "Yeah, you just sign up." Well, that sort of was the first time I learned of it. And then once I got into Congress recently in the last, over the last year, I walked in a convenience store, and there was a kiosk, a little like an ATM, except it said free wireless service. And you just go over, start punching the screen, and you can sign up right there. And I thought, this is just getting way out of control. And, I was in my hometown, drove by I think it was a car repair shop or something, and there's a big sign outside, free cell phones, and sure enough, right at the bottom it said, pursuant to Federal Lifeline program or something like that. So we looked into this, and, there's a lot of waste in government. And a lot of the things that we hear about we need to reform or eliminate or fix, but they won't make up a lot of money. This one's $1 billion.
Yeah, that to me is, and that leads to my next question, because we all know that on our phone bills there's this Universal Service Fund, USF fee.
Yeah, we pay for it, my friend.
But the question that I have for you, and the cost of the program in 1984 and the cost today, the fees have not gone up exponentially. So where is all the rest of this money coming from that's now paying for $1.3 billion? I mean, is it because so many more people are getting phone bills now and have, wireless cell phones, and there are just more phone users that are funding this thing? Or is there another slush fund? Do we know where it's being funded?
Well, I think that it's fair to say that the population and the number of people paying into that fund has increased drastically since 1984. And I would also say that the amount of money that was being spent on free landlines, I don't have the number in front of me, but a fraction of what we're talking about now with the cell phones. And let's be real clear. My bill tries to keep it simple because it's easier to get simple ideas. A, it's easier to communicate them, and B, it's easier to get legislation passed if it's simple. And so I didn't try to start some new complicated formula. I just said, look, we used to do this for landlines only, and in 2008 we started giving free cell phones, and that's when things got out of control because people aren't clamoring, lined up to get a free landline, so they can have dial-up internet or whatever. I mean, it's just not happening. What's happening is, in some households, you'll have numerous people with these cell phones. We had one person reported back in my district that had 10 cell phones. And then I had 2 or 3 constituents who contacted me, and they said, well, my deceased father or mother just got a cell phone in the mail. What's happened is the federal government's funding a lot of this, and they're encouraging and contracting with the private sector to use this as a way to get people hooked on their service. So, for example, give you a cell phone, it has X number of minutes, you use those minutes that month, you buy more. So it's also part of a marketing campaign for a lot of these private companies, and it's just $1 billion we don't have.
Congressman, this is Frank Luber. Several questions here. I understand that the program's rules do not exclude illegal aliens. Is that true?
I think as long as you get one of the types of assistance. Now, I would find it, I'd have to have that list of assistance in front of me. I would find it hard to believe, in at least most of those cases, that those folks would be getting them, that they would be getting those types of assistance. But there's no doubt that that illegals are getting cell phones.
But there is, no mechanism that I know of in place to verify citizenship. All you basically have to do is either receive food stamps, school lunch,
Social Security. If you have a
Social Security
number, you can. Yeah.
So there are a lot of illegal aliens that are already receiving some form of government largesse.
That's correct.
So basically, they don't have to prove anything other than the fact that they're already getting government handouts.
And that's part of that. That's part of the $1 billion.
Part of the $1 billion and ever growing too.
Yep.
Now, what is next? Is the FCC reportedly is proposing a new program to offer free internet,
right,
and low-cost computers to the same people. Now, what's that going to cost?
Well, this is the deal. I call it the inertia of government. And government moves generally speaking, in one direction, and that is it expands. And it looks for new things to do. You almost never have the administrator of a government agency stand up one day and say, our job is done. We did a great job. Let's just shut everything down. I think we've got this issue handled and move on. Almost never happens. So what you're describing is the fact that folks with power seek to expand that. And unfortunately, you don't just have the issue of the power, you have the money that is spent to expand that power. And, if we can't end something like this, things don't bode well.
No, you're absolutely right about that.
This ought to be, come on.
Yeah, we're talking with Congressman Tim Griffin. He's a Republican from Arkansas, and the bill is called Stop Taxpayer-Funded Cell Phones Act, H.R. 3481. That was last year, I believe. Have you reintroduced the bill for this year?
No, it is still introduced in Congress.
Okay.
But I introduced it in November, I think.
Okay. The second question I have is, has anybody looked into the prospect of which private companies are benefiting from this government largesse? And because we've seen a lot of crony capitalism in this administration. And number two, the difference between landlines and cell phones is you can actually send texts on cell phones. And is there anything that prohibits the federal government from sending political message? I know there's the Hatch Act, but does it prohibit the federal government from perhaps sending out a message to the folks that have free cell phones?
Well, I guess if the federal government wanted to do that, they would be able to. Certainly a campaign would be able to, if they could somehow get the numbers. I would have to look into the specifics of that. That's interesting. That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know whether you could do that or not, but certainly folks that are getting this they're getting a number and they're able to text on it. I would assume, in terms of the companies that are benefiting from this, the companies that I've seen are sort of, they're not household names. I'll see this and I'm going anecdotally. I'll see the kiosk in the convenience stores I mentioned, and I saw the sign in the other place, and those were phone companies that I had never heard of. They weren't the AT&T, the Sprints, the Verizons of the world.
Yeah, I think if you could just Google it, you see some assurance company, you see something else called the California Lifeline Program. I mean, you're right. These are all companies I wouldn't recognize.
Yeah. Well, there's one called SafeLink Wireless, which is the original and largest company in the free government cell phone business, and it's owned by a Mexican billionaire by the name of Carlos Slim. Now, Carlos Slim.
Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying the other household names haven't been involved in this in some way, but from what I have seen, most of the ones taking advantage of the opportunity here to market to these folks and get them, get them on their rolls or whatever, or companies that most of us have never heard of.
Well, the reason I mention, this Carlos Slim and SafeLink Wireless and these other names, I mean, do we have the makings of more Solyndras here?
Well, clearly, this is the federal government giving a lot of these companies an in with folks. The problem is, I'm not against folks doing well in the private sector. What I'm against is spending $1 billion that we don't have. And it's my money and your money. Look, I've got the same little line item on my bill that you've got. And a lot of folks don't know that that's what that is. One time I came up with a little, I was on the campaign trail and I came up with this little scenario, this little narrative, and I basically said, from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night, and think of everything that you do, and then think of all the fees and taxes. Turn on your TV. It was taxed when you bought it. The electricity's taxed. The cable's taxed. Someone calls on the phone. The phone was taxed. The phone service is taxed. Your water, your sewage, your hot water, your gas. I mean, and you start adding up all of those taxes. Those are sort of the hidden taxes. People pay that on that universal service fund. They pay that on their cell phone bill. They don't think about it. And so all of that stuff has to be aggregated in addition to income tax, estate tax, and all the other taxes and fees that you pay. And this to me just seems like common sense. Look, we want shut-ins and others to have a landline. That's fine. Let's return it to its original intent.
And I think that would be a good start, but I think the genie's out of the bottle already. Congressman Tim Griffin, thanks again for joining us here this morning and for your efforts to try to put some sanity back into Congress.
Thank you all. Hey, let me tell you, we had a great retreat up your way not long ago. Took my whole family, went to the aquarium. Awesome.
Great. Glad you enjoyed.
Did you meet Mayor Jack O'Malley?
Yeah, Jack O'Malley.
I don't think I met Jack O'Malley. but I have an old friend from an Army unit, Anthony Brown.
Oh yes.
Tony Brown. He was in my Army unit for years, and he was I guess he was in the House of Delegates for a while. And he's still lieutenant governor.
He's still lieutenant governor.
Yep.
He hopes to be a governor when Jack O'Malley leaves. All right.
Y'all take care.
Thanks again, you too. Congressman Tim Griffin, great state of Arkansas. 8:52 traffic and weather first.